Recently, I came to a realization. I don't consume much mainstream Western media anymore. Aside from YouTube, most of the content I enjoy comes from the East rather than the West. But why is that? How come over these past 6.5 years, I've been losing interest in Star Wars and Marvel and gaining more interest in anime and Eastern gaming? I needed answers, so like the unemployed bum I am, I searched the internet and found them at the recent State of Play and Summer Games Fest. Okay, let's back up a bit. What did two events announcing new games have to do with my lack of interest in Western entertainment? Well, during these events, two new games were revealed: God of War Laufey and Stellar Blade Blood Rain, reviving the never-ending battle between the Chuds and the Karens. To simplify their arguments, the Chuds don't like the Laufey spin-off game because they suspect Sony will use Faye to eventually replace Kratos.
So, God of War is centered around Kratos. It's always been centered around Kratos. Who would you want to play as in the new God of War game? The ratings would probably go Kratos, Atreus, and then probably a third character that we're not even thinking of, right? And then Laufey would probably be like number 7. So why would you ever make that character the mainstay of the story, right? Like Tyr, Thor, or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
They're also mad that the devs purposely uglified Faye's design, even though the model Faye is based on is conventionally attractive. Meanwhile, the Karens claim that disliking Faye makes you sexist because you just don't want to play as a woman. And liking Evie from Blood Rain also makes you a sexist and a creep because to them, she looks like a child. Personally, I think the Karens are overreacting. Yes, Evie looks young, but plenty of adults, especially in places like Asia, look younger than they actually are due to things like Eastern beauty standards and genetics. That doesn't mean they are children, it just means they have a youthful appearance. As for the Laufey situation, I can see why the Chuds are upset, because no one really asked for this. Plus, this game doesn't really have a large target audience, since men mostly play God of War for Kratos, and only a small minority of women play games like these. So unless tons of female gamers show up to support this game, Laufey will be at the mercy of its male audience. However, considering that the head writers are both women and recent fans of the franchise,
my first experience with God of War was playing 2018.
I started my first God of War game with 2018 as well. And I actually joined the studio while they were working on Ragnarok. So I got to see that team work on that game and see how Faye came to life. And it was such a large part of how we began to build this character in God of War Laufey.
It's highly unlikely the game's story will appeal that much to men. And if Laufey does poorly, it could damage the franchise, leaving the blame on men who didn't buy or support the game. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be the first time something like that has happened within Western media. Star Wars, Marvel, Star Trek, Dragon Age, The Last of Us, and others have all attempted to appeal to niche audiences, only to fail because the fans and these niche audiences aren't interested. So when these products underperform, these companies start blaming or lying to the consumers. I call it the erosion of Western IP, specifically male-centered IP, because if you've noticed, this kind of thing rarely seems to happen with female-led franchises. But to be fair, it did happen with Disney's live-action remake of Snow White, albeit to a lesser extent, since Rachel Zegler wasn't replaced with a man. It probably would have been a better movie if she had been. The point is, the Western entertainment industry is trying to expand its reach by changing its male-centered IP to appeal to women. However, they're failing because they've forgotten about their main demographic, the Chuds. And to make matters worse, these companies keep blaming and insulting them. But here's the thing, abandoning and slandering your target audience only pushes them away, which will eventually eat at your profit since you need your core fan base to help pay the bills. However, once your fans are gone, it becomes extremely difficult to get them back. Just ask Star Wars Wars. Because even though they just had their first theatrical release in years, The Mandalorian and Grogu, it's being outperformed by two low-budget horrors, Obsession and The Backrooms. This brings me to my next point. Your audience won't wait for you to change. They'll just find someone else who will give them what they want. Hence why people like myself are gravitating towards content created by indie studios and media made outside of the West. So if you want to keep your male audience, maybe make content designed for them and not some niche demographic. No average guy wants a Mary Sue to replace their chud main character. But instead, they call the men who refuse to support this sexist incels that hates female leads, which is objectively untrue. If that were the case, characters like Lara Croft from Tomb Raider or Black Widow from the Avengers wouldn't be popular among males today. Most people don't have a problem with female leads. We have a problem with activists trying to replace or change our leads with ones that don't appeal or relate to us. What these activists don't understand is that it goes both ways regardless of gender. People will be just as upset if the next Tomb Raider replaced Lara Croft with an unattractive male character. So I can understand why some God of War fans won't accept a spin-off game where the main character of over 20 years suddenly gets sidelined for a story about his dead wife. Compare that to the reaction of Stellar Blade Blood Rain. Aside from the usual people complaining about Evie's youthful appearance, the reception for this game has been very positive. Mind you, this game also has a new female protagonist, but unlike Laufey, gamers don't seem to mind. Yes, some people have expressed missing Eve, but most aren't complaining, and those who are said the same thing about Eve when the first Stellar Blade came out. Not to mention, the CEO of Shift Up himself explained that the reason behind Evie's design was to help players relate to her, and so she would have a more defined look and personality. In my opinion, this makes sense given the fact that a common complaint about the first game was about the lack of personality for Eve. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, but plenty of adults, especially in places like Asia, look younger than they actually are due to things like Eastern beauty standards and genetics. So giving Eve one as well helps players relate to her. Simply put, the devs at Shift Up didn't change their protagonist for some niche audience, but to fix complaints about the first game while appealing to their main demographic, Eastern gamers. This is why Eastern games are dominating in the West, because instead of following the crowd, they give gamers what they want unapologetically. And this success isn't just limited to Eastern gaming. It's happening everywhere across all mediums of entertainment. That's why indie projects are crushing popular studios with a fraction of the budget, why anime and manga are becoming more popular than Marvel and DC, why an animated film from China was the most successful film in 2025, and why a team of French developers dominated the Game Awards with a turn-based RPG. The message we consumers are sending is pretty clear. Give us what we want and we'll pay you for it. Don't? Then we'll find someone else who will. These companies forget that they aren't obligated to our money, and the sooner they remember that, the better off they'll be. Either that, or they'll be destroyed by their own greed. But with that said, what do you guys think? Are you gonna play God of War Laufey or Stellar Blade Blood Rain? You like Evie's new design, or do you also think she looks like a child? I want to know your thoughts and opinions below. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as I'd really appreciate it. That's all I got for you today, so see ya.